Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Awesome.
we'll give a couple more minutes.
Yeah,
Typically people join in a few minutes late. Thanks for joining us.
absolutely. My pleasure.
Really excited to see what your the discussion come out.
Yep.
Are you gonna present or is Pavi gonna present? How did you want to split this up?
Yeah, I'll present it with the main theme, and then Pavi has some neuroscience specific examples. So that's how we're gonna do it.
Okay, okay. I typically give 2 or 3 minutes for everyone to comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we should be fine with 30 minutes.
Do you have a hard stop at the end?
Uh, I had a hard stop, but I have moved that meeting, so I should be able to be here for till 10.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
It's hard to predict the length of a discussion.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Let's give a couple more minutes for everyone. Hi, thanks for joining, Pavi. Oh, you're muted.
Here I go. Hi, Jerome. Hi, Bodhi. How are you today?
Good, good. I was saying, yeah, we typically start at 9:03, 9:04, just to allow people to come in. It's a very distributed group, uh, and there are people that arrive even later.
Sounds good.
It's been a so some folks are in Europe and some folks in US, and so we tried to find a time, but support everyone, but it sometimes is challenging.
That makes sense. Hope you can see
Plus, I
my
think,
screen.
yeah, yes, I can see AI too.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's see, it's recorded. Okay, so why don't we get started? I'll give a really brief. Let me share my screen quickly. Okay, so this is, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so first, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have Bodhi and Pavi today. This is the agenda for today. That is on the screen. As usual, we are planning to record this session and post it on YouTube. So if anything occur that you wanted to edit out, we'll do so. For context, in about a week and a half ago, there was an artificial intelligence conference at the Allen Institute where Pavian and Bodhi presented a very interesting framework for AI-assisted analysis and research exploration and hypothesis testing. Pavi has been really excited by the OpenScope project, and so it's a great opportunity to collaborate. Plus, our project has a very long and deep review, along with an analysis plan that has been crafted by the community in great details. And so it's a great sandbox to explore how AI can enable this research. And so that's partly why Privy was so excited about it, because it's just, and then since we're generating a new data set, it's a really nice way to explore what's possible. The way I see it, this is an exploration, and we want to see where it leads, and iterate to make it work one way or another. But I'm really open-minded personally as what comes out, and so we just want to sort of collaborate as a group with them. So Pavi and Bodhi has been building boost tools at AI2, which is a sister organization to the Allen Institute. So we already have some potential relationship. So Bodhi, maybe take it away and introduce yourself briefly if any context is missing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and it's really my pleasure to uh, talk to you all. And I've heard about the OpenScope project last time when we were in the Allen Institute building, whom we call affectionately AI1. Uh, and we have been working on scientific discovery for last 3 years actually, and we have been building several tools at AI2. And I'll quickly give a brief overview of these tools and possibly try to make connections where it might be useful based on my best understanding, because I'm a computer scientist in training, how it could be useful to integrate with the OpenScope project and the community. So let's get started. So I'm Bodhi. I'm a senior research scientist here. I've been leading this direction called data-driven discovery using AI tools. Broadly for making new scientific discoveries. So and this particular direction is part of this bigger umbrella called ASTA. ASTA is our ecosystem of scientific ecosystem of AI agents that are particularly geared towards different aspects of scientific discoveries. For example, starting from like finding a paper, summarize the literature, hypothesis generation, planning and executing the computational experiments, analyzing datasets, and then eventually writing to communicate these results. And for that, we have built a universe of tools we call Asta tool, which are particularly geared towards certain capabilities of doing science. So I'll quickly go over them, but today mainly we're going to focus on two main tools named Data Voyager and Auto Discovery. These are related to the data-driven discovery that I've been working on. So before that, I'll also quickly share the spectrum of tools that we have built, because these could actually also help us secondarily to actually augment some of the things that we could do with data-driven discovery tools. So Paper Finder is a easily understandable tool that allows you to sort of explore the literature with any natural language query. So we have a chat-based interface called Asta. It's available online. You can find it at as asta.allen.ai. I'll share the name later. Where it's a chat-based interface where you can ask a question like, okay, find me papers related to OpenScope, let's say, and it would be able to come up with a list of papers, fairly similar as any search, but it also provides you very deep reasoning about why one paper has been retrieved. Uh, it has links to the paper itself, and it has a natural language summary about why this paper is relevant to the question that you have asked. And not only that, it will also have evidences taken from the paper itself that shows that why this paper is a good fit for the query. Following up, not only it can find papers, but it can also summarize or synthesize literature. So, for example, you're trying to do a literature survey, and you have a very high level question. Okay, do a literature survey for work similar to OpenScope. And then it should be able to go to the web, go to our Semantic Scholar repository. Not sure if you have used Semantic Scholar. It's very similar to like other Scholar websites where you can browse and find papers. So it'll go there, it'll find relevant papers, and then it'll come up with like a comprehensive summary of these papers targeted toward a question. So if you say that do a literature review, then it'll do it. You can also ask like compare like method one versus method two, and then it'll be able to find papers and summarize and create a comparison table if you would like. Okay, so these are like two main tools that focuses on literature-driven discovery and assistance. However, like today's focus is more on data-driven discovery. So apart from literature synthesis and literature finding, I think a majority of some of the experimental field in science heavily focuses on data collection and then analyzing of these large sets of data sets. And while data collection is still a very manual and laborious process, one thing that we started thinking that can we at least automate or help scientists to make much faster progress in performing data analysis. And this is particularly useful because often data analysis have like fixed workflows, codes that's been written before, hence can be reused, and so on and so forth. And we know that today's AI systems or large language models are particularly capable of generating code fluently in different programming languages, right? So here we take use of the programming language Python, and we provide an interface where any researcher can upload a data set and ask any question, and then the system goes on and it will be able to reason through that question, write several pieces of Python codes, eventually get to that answer. And not only that, it also provides like a list of assumptions that was made to derive to get to that finding. And this mimics similarly the way we often perform like data analysis in different scientific domain. Also, you will in the end you get the Python code that you can then take forward and maybe embed in your workflow, for example. So the results that we get here are perfectly reproducible. The another interesting way of thinking this would be the AI is interacting with the dataset using the Python as a language. So it's not doing the reasoning on its own. It is doing the reasoning on its own, but the interaction with the dataset is happening through programmatically, and that gives us a very good handle about reproducibility and inspection and debugging, for example. So we have been looking at like the use of these kind of data driven tools, and one thing that we have done last year, where we were trying to find or extract findings from the existing papers written by Allen Institute. And what we have seen that often it's very hard to extract known findings because they may be embedded differently in a paper, or maybe the way the figure is generated, it's unclear to actually glean an insight from that figure, for example. So just doing a paper search is not probably often the only way of finding information from a large corpus. Whereas we found that when you have access to also the accompanying data sets for these papers, which is true for most of the Allen Institute papers, you can run tools like this, which we call Data Voyager, that can take that data set that was provided with the paper, and then you can ask targeted questions, which helps you to not only reproduce the results that is presented in the paper, but also allow you to then further ask follow-up questions. This interface is also chat-based, which is very interesting because you can then ask follow-up question. You can say that, oh, I like this hypothesis. Can you please now add this as a confounder and see that if we still see the effect or not. So which gives you a very interesting handle towards data analysis. And we are seeing that it's significantly a high number of times it is able to recover some of those results where just purely searching over the papers may not get to that. So this is what we called like a goal-driven setup, where you have a goal, you have a particular goal in mind, and you are trying to get to an answer based on that goal. So, okay, before I move on to the next setup, the best part of our tool is that its flexibility. I'm not sure how useful it is for this community, but I still want to say that not only you can upload your data sets to this tool and do the analysis, we are also able to deploy this tool in a privacy preserving manner into across different institutions, which is often very important because people may not want to share data sets in a common platform, but we were able to sort of host our tool in a particular server, or where the data is residing, without ever like data leaving from that particular data cluster, which has been really useful. And this was a collaboration with Cancer AI Alliance, which is five major cancer institute, where we were able to do inference across like data sets across cancer centers in one shot. So, for example, doctors were able to ask a question about a particular drug and its effectiveness, and we were able to pull through the data across multiple cancer centers to answer that question, which gives you a much bigger sort of like a population size to answer that question. So that was a very successful effort to show that this kind of approach can then extend or go beyond just like a web-based service and can be deployed in, for example, institutions where data sharing is complicated. All right, so let's get back to what I was initially discussing, that all of these are still very goal-driven setup. So if I try to explain that through a schematic, the way it would be that, let's say you often have a goal or a hypothesis in your mind, you have a data set, you would like to run a certain experiment. So for example, again, like excuse me for my lack of knowledge, but I think as I understand OpenScope, like you probably have had some analysis plan about some of the data that you have collected, and you probably would like to carry over those analysis plan and essentially run testing, hypothesis testing, which as I heard from Jerome, are often like statistical tests or computational experiments, right? To be able to run those computational experiments, which is true in our case because we can run almost any computational experiments using Python. So you can do that, and that gets to you an answer, right? So this is what we call like a goal-driven setup, where the user, the scientist, is driving the analysis with a goal or with a hypothesis in mind, and it's really agents is just performing, just executing the planning and executing the experiment. However, oftentimes when you have collected a large data sets and you often have a set of hypotheses in your mind, but you want to explore further. So let's say immediately you are wondering what are the next possible best directions to go to. Maybe you have several ideas in your mind that you could explore. However, right now you remain uninformed given the state of the research, and you were thinking, okay, what is the next step that I should be doing? And we thought that that is an interesting point where a system that could come up with interesting hypotheses might be very useful for the user to move forward or take a multiversed view about the dataset. And that leads us to this interesting paradigm called hypothesis search. The way to think about it is that you have a dataset. Potentially, there are millions of hypotheses that are true in that dataset or valid in that dataset, and you are exploring this set of hypotheses only to find the ones that are interesting to you. So I often give this canonical example that take any data set where you have some sort of like a survey or metadata about participants or a population. You can always come up with a hypothesis such as age is positive, which probably will hold true in most data sets. It's a valid hypothesis, but you probably are not interested in that hypothesis, right? So it is really a question of search, and that is our computer science take on scientific discovery, and which brings us to this paradigm called open-ended discovery. That how can we effectively search the space of hypothesis to find the one that are most interesting? And I'll quickly define what we mean by most interesting in a minute. But essentially, the idea is to be able to find hypotheses that can challenge known assumptions or even inspire entirely new lines of inquiry, which can then extend beyond a particular plan or a particular goal or time limit that often we have while looking through the data. And for that, we created this new tool called Auto Discovery. This uses the tool I said before, Data Voyager, internally, and I'll quickly tell how it does. But this builds on top of that, and this is mainly focusing on generating the next best hypothesis to try into, and that kind of connects the loop. Now coming back to the definition of interestingness, right? So we were looking at this sort of like meta metric, or that how people do science, and we have found that surprisal, which is something, or improbability of a results, have often a higher correlation with the impact. And we were able to mechanize this notion of surprisal to allow the coverage of this unexplored space. So, like from a heuristic point of view, we are using surprisal to guide the system to look for more surprising hypotheses. So I'll quickly define surprisal here just to get concrete. Uh, so imagine you have come up with a hypothesis, or the system has come up with a hypothesis based on the metadata, or based on the way data was collected and the space of the data set. It hasn't proved it yet. It hasn't ran the data analysis. At that point, you can ask this. We are asking the system, sort of as an observer of the world, that okay, so you have come up with this hypothesis. This is a statement that you're observing. What is your belief about this hypothesis right now? And let's say the system says, well, I think it has a 38% chance to be true in the data set. We said, okay, that's great. That is your prior belief about this hypothesis. Now, the system has the ability to run or conduct the data analysis in the data set, right? Like using the data voyager tool. It does it, and after it conducts that experiment and collects additional evidence from the data, we ask the same question. Okay, now I have collected more evidence. What is your belief? And if we see that if there is an epistemic shift in belief, that is, now it believes more or less, and if it is significantly more or less, we say that it is a surprising hypothesis with respect to the that AI system's knowledge. And all we are trying to do is like maximize that surprisal with respect to that particular system. And we need find that this measure, which we call a Bayesian surprise, is actually 65% of time often correlates with human judgment, which is great. So using this surprisal metric, we then use a tree search. Imagine this is your hypothesis space, and we are searching over potential hypotheses. So we are looking for yellow nodes, which are surprising, and we are encouraging the system to find more and more yellow nodes, which happens using a search also, which is famous from the AlphaGo line of work. Might be aware where they use a similar nonlinear search that allows you to explore a potential space much efficiently. Okay, so and I'll quickly switch over to some of the example, and then Pavi actually has created also some more example related to the community. But and we have been working with Allen Institute already, and we ran auto discovery on some of the Alzheimer datasets, quantitative neuropathological datasets. Um, Interestingly, it was able to find hypotheses that was really deemed valuable to the main leading scientist of those projects. So, for example, in one case, it was able to find a particular ratio of a laminar gradient of 88, which was like overlooked, or was not found during the initial data analysis when Kyle et al. Wrote their Nature Neuroscience paper. And when we showed this to Kyle, he was really surprised by this formation of like ratio, and he said that it is something that they didn't pick up on, and they think that it is really relevant for the major hypothesis that they have presented. So this is like this augmenting known results, but with a much stronger proposition, which was automatically found running the system on the same data set that they have performed their data analysis and wrote their paper. So which was very inspiring for us. And we have been doing this extensive sort of partnership with other institutes. So Swedish Cancer Institute here at Seattle, and they also have a Paul Allen Research Center. So Dr. Kelly Paulson, she is head of immuno-oncology, and we have been running auto discovery to some of the public cancer data set, just trying to see that if we can find such new insights like we have found in Kyle's case automatically, and then later can verify through wet lab tests, because that will be amazing. And we have seen that there are often large public genomic data set that exist on cancer genomic, where majority of the results that were found later by the researcher were known results. And that often asks the question that have we searched that data set enough to find interesting hypotheses. So with that thesis, we started running auto discovery, and we did find a new hypothesis that completely challenges the known wisdom. And these are the great examples of the system being able to come up with something that is truly surprising. So it actually were able to find immune checkpoint genes in some sort of immune cold cancer, which is really amazing because people have never thought that immune cold cancer will have this kind of checkpoint genes. Hence, the traditional line of sort of treatment was doing through surgical interventions. However, it was really useful. But we thought that okay, let's try to confirm this with a different data set, and that's exactly where this kind of paradigm will be useful. And maybe Pavi also will be able to show this interesting paradigm that how you can best use these two tools. So you have auto discovery, which is open-ended exploration. It is able to look through a data set and find interesting hypotheses. Now we have found an interesting hypothesis like this one. What we generally do, we go to a secondary data set to confirm, making sure that this is true. And that's exactly where you are automatically switching from an open-ended setup to a goal-driven setup, right? And we have built tools for both of the setup. So that's what we did. We started with auto discovery. We found something really interesting, and then we wanted to do a secondary verification of the same hypothesis. Now, so basically, we know the goal. We are not doing open-ended exploration anymore, but in a different data set. So we moved back to the data voyager, which is the tool I talked about earlier, and then to try to confirm that hypothesis, right? So this is kind of like a cyclical sort of way of using these two tools in tandem, where you do a little bit of open-ended exploration, you come back, do a little bit of goal-driven exploration, and you do again a little bit of open-ended exploration. So this kind of ebb and flow is really useful and also gives scientists the best control about the autonomy. So they can make things more autonomous running auto discovery. They can make things more synchronous by going to tools like Data Voyager, where they are in charge of the flow and the kind of hypothesis that is testing. So anyway, so we were able to confirm the similar hypothesis in a different data set, and finally we were also able to confirm that in lab, which was really fascinating. So just for the interest of time, I'll quickly switch over and give a very brief primer of how to even get started, and then Pavi will also follow up with very interesting examples that might be more relevant. Let me know if you can still see my screen.
I can.
Good, good. So if you go to autodiscovery.allen.ai, this is publicly available, and all you need to do is like just sign in with any email ID if you would like. So I'm quickly going to show you how it looks like when you land here. You will see all of your previous runs, and I'll quickly just show you how do you start a session. I won't go into the much of a details because Pavi has created a great example. So the way you generally set up a session is very simple, where you can go here. You can ideally you would be able to upload any data set, right? And see, which is very beautiful here, that often we have preloaded data sets. These are of preloaded data sets from Allen Institute, which is useful. So if we eventually collaborate together, we might also preload all the OpenScope data sets here, so that anyone can kind of configure a new auto discovery run very easily. So
Oh,
you basically attach, you can attach or upload any data set here, or maybe just click here. You see that when you attach a data set, we provide the schema of the data set. So you can also provide the schema of the data set just to help the system. This takes currently you are seeing the public version, which has a limit of 20 gigabytes, but internally for we can also extend to till 100 gigabytes, which is very useful. And this also takes almost all broad range of sort of files, including like NWB files that Pavi works on. So once you have uploaded the dataset, all we ask that you provide some context about the dataset. What is it about? How it is collected? It's almost like you are helping a mentee to start on a project, right? And that's all really you need. And after that, all you need to do is set up a budget to that open-ended exploration. And here, let's say if I set 100, what it really means that it will try 100 new hypotheses or 100 new experiments to come up with. And the goal is to maximize the number of surprising results, right? So the goal is to find 100 surprising results. It will never happen because yield is not 100%. The yield is 20%. So if you run 100 hypotheses, you will find 20 of them as 20 of them as surprising, right? But still very useful. Okay, I won't go to the results because Pavi will show the results. I'll quickly want to also show the data voyager tool. So this is the open-ended exploration. You start the run. Each hypothesis takes around 4 minutes to 5 minutes. So if you are really running 100 hypotheses, it will take 400 to 500 minutes. So it's like a long automatic run. You set it up in the night, and next morning you have the results. Going back, in Asta, which is also which is basically from where you start, and you can also go to auto discovery, by the way, just clicking here. You see the link here. So in Asta, you have this tab called Analyze Data, which is the first tool I talked about, which is goal driven. So here you could potentially attach a data set. Similarly, you can also use this attach button where you can upload any data set. But here you need to provide a question because this is a goal-driven setup. So once you have a question, and you can ask anything, and the way I often do, I run auto discovery, I find a hypothesis that I really like, and then upload a secondary data set and actually try to test the same hypothesis here. And you click hit run, and then it will basically run. And again, I probably won't show the results because I'll let Pavi to actually now take a neuroscience specific example that might be interesting to the community and show a demo of both of these tools. So over to you, Pavi.
Thank you, Bodhi. Can you all hear me okay? I'll quickly share my screen. Hi, everyone. I'm Pavi. I am a young investigator, which is a equivalent of postdoc at AI2. And I also have a visiting scientist role with Allen Institute. So I get to really be in a beneficial position to work with these two premier institutes, take their AI tools and apply on Allen Institute data sets and really push forward the auto the notion of AI assisted discovery for neuroscience. So with that, please let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you, Bodhi, for giving an overview of the tools that we have under Asta Toolbelt. I thought it may be fun to share a neuroscience specific example. Um, with the collaboration, so I worked with the Neural Dynamics Institute on a different data set that is based on a dynamic routing task. The goal is to basically explore here, let me show you. So the way I set up this auto discovery run is like give the session a name. In the dataset context, I gave some information about the data, how it was collected, and what are the questions that we are interested in. So this for this right now looks like a large piece of text, but this actually comes from a project proposal that's already in Allen Institute's webpage. So about the data. So as you have seen from Bodhi's examples, the agentic tools that we have built are very generic, and the agents under the hood have the capability of working with either a neuropixels dataset or calcium imaging or anything. So it can actually load a Parquet file or a pickle file or NWB file and learn the context that this is a neuroscience experiment and this is a neural recording that looks like EFIS or that looks like calcium imaging, and then it can actually route the analysis plan accordingly with very little directions from the scientists themselves, like the human scientists themselves. So here about the data, I explained like this dataset contains neural, kinematic, and experimental data, and this is coming from Allen Institute of Neural Dynamics Dynamic Routing Project. Here are the known gaps, and here is something about the task and about the way what does each file represent, right? In this particular run, I have uploaded five files, like five NWB files. Each file is like belongs to a single subject and follows NWB standards. That's all the information that I actually provided. And I in the data explanation, I also said each file is like represents a single subject. So when you do a hypothesis testing, make sure you are testing it across multiple subjects to really verify a hypothesis is true. Okay. adding some information about the data, the task, and how it is collected. Now you can actually literally go and set how many experiments do you want to run. Working with the Bodhi's team, what I learned is the more experiments you run, the better the quality, the deeper the analysis, and better the quality of the hypothesis itself. So the way to think about it is, for example, you can see here is in this data set, here are the 150 experiments that auto discovery ran. Each node, you can take each node to be like one independent research group. So the first experiment one came up with one hypothesis and did some generated code, tested the hypothesis on this data set. Then, based on the results, 13, 15, and 35 are like experiment IDs. It came up with 3 new hypotheses to test. So the deeper nodes have information about what was previously found in this particular branch. So you can actually think of each branch as independent research groups working on this data set. So because of this nature, you may have groups of hypotheses that get at the same theme. Like, for example, let's see. Let's actually take this one, this one ID7 as an example. Let me open it in full screen. So you can see the hypothesis is that the position of neural population state in MOS, motor cortex, along a specific readiness dimension prior to stimulus onset predicts the reaction time of the subsequent response on a trial by trial basis. Basically, the hypothesis says the position of where in the along a readiness dimension identified from neural data, the position of the state space predicts the reaction time, right? So this hypothesis is believed to be true before doing any experiments. That's the belief before. And after generating this analysis plan, so the analysis plan basically says experiments are, okay. So let's look at the experiment plan. How would you the agent comes up with a plan to test this particular hypothesis. Here, the objective is to link pre-stimulus preparatory state to behavioral variability and predict reaction time. So these are the steps that it would take to test this hypothesis. And these are the deliverables. The deliverables could be statistics or figures or like simple text-based results with like again statistics. So here is the code that is generated to test this hypothesis. So you can see like it writes code to load the NWB file, apply some QC on the units, and then filter out units to predict, calculate reaction time, and do the hypothesis testing. And you can also see the output of running the code here. This is one easy way to verify if there is any error in running the code. What do you expect if you run this code in your Python, VS Code or like wherever you want to run your Python stuff. So after that, you have figures because I zoomed in too much. Let's see. So you have plots in raw condition versus control, where like you detrend it for something. Here are the predicted reaction times from the neural preparatory neural state, and these are the actual reaction time. You actually can see a good correlation here. So in addition to the plots, here is a review of what the agent set out to do and whether the experiment was faithfully implemented and the hypothesis was tested sufficiently. So I want to highlight two things here. So an agentic system comes up with a hypothesis, right? And then a data voyager like thread generates code to test that hypothesis. But there is also a inbuilt validation system that actually looks at whether the generated code faithfully tests the hypothesis or not, and if the code needs to be iterated. Bodhi, you can actually correct me and add more context if you'd like. So that validation component leads to really, like, iterate. So if the code generated by the agent was not faithfully testing the hypothesis, then the validation agent reviewer catches it and makes the loop run again, like rewrite code to regenerate code to test the hypothesis. So there are some inbuilt validations that are present, and then once we actually see the results for this particular hypothesis, at least, sorry, I was trying to resize my screen to have a.
No worries. There's a question in the chat that I think is valuable probably to everyone, but I think it might be worth it we discuss it. So David asks, how does it have a prior belief before the experiment?
Yeah.
I think it's important to clarify how that works.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'll try to answer that a little bit in the chat, but I can actually speak it over. So that's a fantastic question, and we spend a lot of time thinking about how to define the prior belief, right? Technically, this prior belief should come from any external sources before you have performed the experiment. Technically, I'll tell how it is happening in our case, but let's think about the framework here. Ideally, let's say when we are doing this, let's say we don't have auto discovery, but we are performing this open-ended research, we often have a prior belief. And the prior belief generally comes from our intuition and our experience about the field by reading related works, right? So we try to mimic that using an AI, using the language model here. So these language models are extremely powerful tools because they have been trained on the whole internet, right? So they have probably seen like all possible publications until a particular time point, let's say end of 2025. It has looked at all of those papers and ingested all of that knowledge, right? And another way of thinking would be like it's like a kind of like a wisdom of the crowd. So we are basically trying to get a guess or sort of like a gut belief from this language model based on its trained knowledge, which we call a parametric knowledge because it's in model parameter, and ask the language model to come up with a belief. This again, but the point is this belief may not be calibrated because the language model might come up with a belief with a very different point of reference, and we have seen that happening sometime. So this is not set in stone. So essentially, the surprisal here you are getting is a surprising to the system, but it may not be a surprising hypothesis to you because you actually don't believe the prior here should not be 0.71. You think the prior here should be zero point 0.9. You probably expected this to be true and eventually it found to be true, right? So the green plot, the posterior is more of like a ground truth, right? Like if you run the data analysis, you find the results. But before you run the analysis, where your prior belief stands actually helps you to say which is surprising or which is not. Given that we don't have access to human scientists while we are doing the search, we are using the language model as a proxy for that frame of reference. So according to that frame of reference, it is a surprising hypothesis. It may not be when you look at it, but we generally see that these two sets kind of overlap. It's not 100%. That means all of the hypotheses that it will say as surprising may not be surprising to you. However, there would be a good overlap. And what our conjecture was that we didn't believe that the intersection would be non-null. So any non-null intersection is truly amazing for us to know that hey, we were able to come up with something that is also surprising to the human that was undiscovered before, which is really amazing, right? Of course, we want to improve that yield, we want to maximize that intersection, but so far it is a non-null. So essentially the prior belief is based on a language model's own knowledge and own idea. However, one could actually potentially recalibrate the surprisal by inputting their prior belief, which right now the interface doesn't allow. But we are working towards something where you can now actually input your own belief and recalibrate and recompute the surprisal score, and you might now see a different ordering of the hypothesis based on your prior belief. So that's also another idea.
Yes. And also, I wanted to add one more point to that. That's exactly right. So the prior right now comes from LLM's training data and like LLM's belief itself. But one thing I actually have been doing and with Aster tools are literally like take the hypothesis and go to paper finder. For example, here, this is one of the hypotheses that that auto discovery came up with. Find papers related to this hypothesis. You can go to ask the paper finder and literally paste the hypothesis and find out if there are already in literature, if there is already a perfect paper that perfect match that a paper talks about this particular hypothesis. You can actually see that the hypotheses are very specific to the data set. So since this is also a natural language conversation and dialogue, you could follow up with, okay, while there is no perfect match, there are papers in literature that talks about frontal and motor cortices together and motor action encoding and context specific population subspaces and sensory guidance. Now in the results, you can actually find papers uh, that are relevant to all these four criteria, or they are somewhat relevant, meaning they meet 3 out of 4 criteria. And you not only find papers relevant to the hypothesis, you can also pinpoint in the paper what evidences exist related to this particular hypothesis. So this is one way of post hoc trying to find out what literature exists tied to a hypothesis. I've been actually using that framework to identify for a hypothesis that I'm interested in, what are supporting evidences present, what are the opposing evidences present, and what are contextual evidences present. So it gives like the human scientist updated literature based like grounding on I. So LLM thinks this hypothesis is like zero point 0.7. Yeah, it is like it has a belief of zero point 0.7 to be true, but based on the literature and the evidence I see, my recalibrated belief is like, you know, zero point 0.8 or zero point 0.9. I already think this should be true because there are like many supporting literature or things like that. So my, yeah, right now it comes from training data, but Asta also has a system to like, you know, link literature to it post hoc.
So
Is that
I have a sort of a practical question. So how would you use this tool in the collaborative context? Like, like if you have
Yeah.
several people, because how would you use it?
this is
Okay.
a great question. One that is like something I'm interested in too. Yeah, Bodhi, please go ahead.
Yeah, so couple of things and couple of things that is already in plan and work in progress. So couple of things. One, that you can already share anything. So technically, you should be able to share an experiment to any of your
Oh,
colleague, and they should be able to explore as it is, so they can interact with all of the results and find through. This is true for both auto discovery and data voyager. So you should be able to share everything. The tricky part is that yeah, the collaborative part is little bit tricky. We can do it. The part is that we have to then make sure that whoever gets access to whose data. So that's why we didn't do it publicly, because if you
mm,
you can access to the results if someone shares that with you, but if we allow you to actually now interact,
Multiple.
to continue with that session, then you will have access to the underlying data that some other user have
I
uploaded.
see.
So there is some consent problem here. Hence, for a public facing version, this is probably going to be very tricky to do from, like, let's say, a legal point of view, right? However, I feel like from an institution, like with our collaboration with AI1, Jerem, I think this is a perfect use case, and that's what I think we tried to like sort of do with by preloading dataset. So once we have preloaded dataset, let's say all datasets from OpenScope are preloaded. When you come to auto discovery or data voyager, then essentially it's fine because everyone is starting from the same point, and then we might just open up more user to just allow access, right? So for example, in data voyager, it's almost then becomes like a shared Python notebook where and other user also can come in with an active mode, and they can ask follow-up questions. There is still like engineering challenges. For example, what happens if two users actually trying to edit the whole thing at the same time, and so on and so forth. But this is possible. Also for auto discovery, I think one thing we are currently working on is resuming a run. So let's say you have started a run, you have ran it for like 100 hypotheses, and then you share that with someone else. And if we can figure out that both of the user can have access to the same data set, we can allow the second user to resume a run with a different input context, but with the same sort of tree, right? So all of these are just technically possible. We can do it like today in the backend. It's just that the consent part is very tricky. So I think we probably have to like build such use cases like case by case. So technically it is possible, no problem. It's just that when we do that, and if there is like strong enough interest, we can totally do it.
And I'm just curious, what Pavi, what's your experience taught you with the Elva dataset? Where would you start? Like,
Oh,
because neuroscience is really complex, it's very multimodal,
yes.
much richer than the examples you show, where like you start from a social study or like a statistical Excel sheet, or like it has many dimensions, and so there's so many directions. And
Yes.
I'm curious where you would start.
Oh, yeah, this is actually a fantastic question. I'm still actually trying to refine my knowledge and understanding working with it. So, intent is actually a great place to specify what you are interested in and what you're not
Uh-huh.
interested in. So, for example, also, let's start with the basics, right? If you can, if your data is in a standardized format like NWB, the amount of explanation you have to give about the specific file itself is all. You don't need that much explanation. Agents understand NWB files, the schema and the structure, and how to understand the data. So which is great, but you have to teach the agent to curate the data in the first place. You know what I mean? So, for example, if you have 100 or 120 mice recordings in S3 bucket or in Dandy, uh, Data Voyager or Auto Discovery need not load all of the mice data into context and memory to test a hypothesis about PFC versus motor area, for example. You may not have the recording uniformly in like across all the mice. So data curation is something human scientists teach agents. So you basically can tell the agent in like verbally that, so we have recordings for this project, but the neural for example, in the dynamic routing dataset, they record using 6 neuropixels probe, but where they are inserted can vary across different mice recordings, right? So not all mice may have the brain area that we are interested in. So in before you actually do the data analysis, you first curate the data, find the NWB files that has those um, brain regions of interest, and then do your statistical tests on them, like whether you see a significant difference in this group versus control or not. So agents understand the file format and neuroscience data, EFIS, SOFIS, etc. But data curation is still the human scientist teaching the agent. Next, you can use this intent box to your advantage. When you actually create an auto discovery run, the intent box looks like it will take a sentence or two. But it can actually take paragraphs. You are literally telling the agent or the auto discovery system that generate hypotheses related to these specific general questions. So in your report, you already have some first order analysis outlined, right? They are perfect use cases for this. This is the data set. This is the bigger question that I am looking at. Now, all the hypotheses that you are generating should connect to these bigger questions. There may be superficial correlations in the data that show up, but those patterns are not interesting if they are not fitting this intent. That's kind of how I look at it. And the better specific, like yeah, if you can scope your uh, bigger goals and be more specific, then my experience has been auto discovery follows your lead in that. Um, this is like if you can actually take a look at it. This actually feels very verbal, right? Yes, Bodhi.
I'll let you finish.
Yeah, so you can specify what you are interested in and what you do not want, you are not interested in. I think the at least the results I've seen so far, the hypothesis quality like improved with our definitions of like relevance and scoping. And yeah, Bodhi, you can go ahead. I have one other thing I want to connect before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think this intent is something I wanted to also touch upon a little bit, like philosophically, why did we even keep the option of like adding intent? Initially, we didn't because we didn't think that it's an open-ended system, so you didn't need to say any intent. Ideally, it should be able to find all the things that you would like, but practically, what we have seen, I think Pavi has mentioned, and there are other cases where, let's say, there are data sets that have find that can have finding across like multiple directions. For example, we were working with the Alzheimer folks at AI1. There was a data set that has data related to Alzheimer and then data related to dementia broadly. And then Kyle, the scientist, saying that, oh, I only care about Alzheimer, I don't care about broader hypothesis about dementia. But when you are doing completely open-ended run with a cold start, it will come up with hypotheses in both front because they coexist in the dataset. So this is the idea to sort of narrow down or scope down the search. And it's not like you are making things more goal driven like Data Voyager, where it's like very specific hypothesis that you want to test. However, here you are sort of like trying to narrow down and like from an agentic point of view, this intent directly goes as an instruction to the hypothesis generator. So every time the hypothesis generator is coming up with a new hypothesis, it sees this piece of text. That's how you should be thinking. It doesn't affect the beliefs because the beliefs are still with respect to the language model, right? This intent is mainly to kind of sample different kind of hypotheses that would be otherwise if you don't provide an intent. So that's how I think about it. And I have often also see, which is super useful, uh, to use intent. So one thing that like you already have some preconceived notion and you can come up with the intent, but I've seen like running auto discovery in a iteration is super useful. That we have been doing with other partners, where we started with no intent. We ran it first for 100 hypotheses. We found there are 5 potential directions that are worth chasing for. Then we created another session with the same data set, but now provided those 5 directions as intent, saying that, oh, now I'm only interested in this 5 direction, now run along. And then we kind of tried to narrow down the search as a natural process rather than you could do whatever you would like, but this is also another process that was super useful. So
I want to keep there's some question in the audience, Bodhi.
yeah, go for it.
David, I think, raised his hands first.
Yeah, this is really, really, really cool. I wanted to ask this question last week, but there wasn't enough time during the 30-minute talks. But I just want to get your guys' thoughts on like how like complicated the data can be and like how complicated the analyses can be in this sort of framework. And like I just feel like sometimes like with neural data, as Jerome was mentioning, there's way more complexity than a simple table where you have to do statistics on. That obviously you can tell the agent, look for these things, be aware of these things in the experiment, like because even like experiment to experiment might have some differences that are really important. So what's your experience with like, I don't know, like doing analyses with complicated data sets and like what the results have looked like? Have they made sense? Like this data set that you're looking at is actually kind of complicated. So I'm actually interested to see what it's telling you.
Yeah, so that is actually an interesting question. Something that so AI for neuroscience hasn't happened for a reason, and that is this reason. Data is complicated. Analysis is, I kind of feel like it all comes back to signal to noise ratio, right? There's a lot of, even in the best quality recording, the signals about findings are not that predominant. You are literally looking for a needle in a haystack, and if you, if you can do that in a systematic manner. So this all my experience so far has been, I've been thinking from data to findings, it's a multi-step process, right? So from the data you curate what is what you curate the data for specific hypothesis or analysis, and then even in the analysis it's a multi-step process to extract relevant features and find the right metric to capture. So the metrics that we want to um, the metrics that point us to like findings are also not standard or like readily available too, right? Sometimes you have to find creative ways of modeling to it. Like for example, how do you measure credit assignment? It's not a straightforward metric. What proxy metrics can you come up with? Is it decoding accuracy? Then when you do that model fitting, you are not able to get good decoding accuracy because the model is bad, or like the fitting is bad, or the data curation is bad. So there are many failure modes, but I think the agent is intelligent enough now to identify some of those failure modes, and we have like an interactive system right here where the human and the agent can together iterate through the analysis and feature extraction and the metrics curation to come up with good findings. So it definitely is an iterative step, but what used to take 6 months to an year of effort can take 2 to 3 weeks of effort. And I'm so excited at that possibility. Did that answer? Okay, cool. I see one more raised hand if you have.
Marcel?
Yeah, thank you very much. I assume you can generate way more hypotheses than you can investigate.
Yes.
So how do you decide which ones you want to give a try and which ones you don't follow?
This question is better answered by Bodhi.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There are two things that's happening, and that's exactly where the Monte Carlo tree search comes into the play. Technically, like you can generate many hypotheses at random. Right now, it's not random generation, so it's almost like this language model has the capability of generating any hypothesis. We are trying to turn its head towards the interesting directions. Which is basically guided by the Monte Carlo tree search. So the tree search is basically telling me, based on all the past discoveries I've made, like knowing what's up. Maybe Pavi, if you could like quickly open a tree, it probably easier to explain, right? So yeah, uh, uh, yeah, if you could drag it slightly on the right. Right, so it starts from the middle, which is the root node, and then it basically tries to expand, right? So each children is basically a follow-up from that particular hypothesis. So here, like it went to 6, and then it followed up with particular 10 hypotheses here, which is not surprising, right? Whereas if you look at somewhere else, you will see that it was, so look at the 5 and 22 31 and then 48 57, right? So this is a particular branch where it found most of the surprising hypotheses. So next time, let's say you are starting from this state of research, the system will tell you to probably sample from this region rather than any of the other region, because this region has the highest probability of generating a surprising hypothesis, which is actually captured by the Monte Carlo research. So every time a node gets rewarded, that is highest rewarded, will be expanded. That is how we do it. So it's not random
Yeah.
sampling. Yeah.
And how do we decide on the 0th step?
The zeroth step is just like a fake hypothesis, which is like load the data and perform descriptive analysis. And at that point, we just generate eight experiments. And at the 0th step, one is picked random, right? So let's say you are at the 0th step, you have 8 hypotheses generated, you picked 5, right? Now 5 is surprising. Now you have a choice that would you actually now go from 0, expand from 0, or expand from 5, right? So Monte Carlo research will actually reward 5 as a higher reward node, so it will expand from 5. But it's not only exploitative, it's also explorative, right? So you could just say that you can always have a heuristic only like expand surprising hypothesis, but you will see that often you will get surprising hypothesis from a non-surprising one, right? So there is value of expanding non-surprising nodes as well. It really depends on the region. So the tree search actually balances this exploitation, which is always chase for surprising hypothesis, versus exploration. Okay, let's try something new. and it kind of tries to balance that, and which eventually achieves a better performance.
Okay, thanks.
It's 10:04. I want to keep an eye on time. So it seems like an obvious next step, as you said, is as we are packaging our new data, it will be to move them on new servers so that everyone has access. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that was, sorry, Pavi, you want to go
Yeah,
ahead?
sorry, Bodhi, didn't mean to interrupt you. So we can actually figure out a couple of options here. The best thing to do would be actually to, if you already have it in Dandy,
Uh-huh.
Bodhi, we can work offline to see if we can load from Dandy, which is similar to an S3 bucket.
Okay.
So you can directly provide access to the Dandy archive and load some data. So the first step would be to actually have like a curated test set, like few subjects that we can do auto discovery on and data voyager on to do some first order analysis, and then we can scale to like more data by like linking directly to Dandy. What do you think? These are like just couple of suggestions.
That makes sense. And then the notebook that some people generate, they will share them by just sharing the link, or could we upload the I saw there's notebook discussion. Could we upload the notebook on a GitHub or something like that?
I just wanted to understand like what works best for you, and then we can actually provide recommendation like how we can support that. Like what would be best for you, Jerem?
I think everybody should weigh in. I mean, Alex, do you have thoughts on there? I think you might.
Yeah, so my experience has been that Google Colab is ideal because of dependencies. So the problem is if you have local code, it can become very difficult for other people to run the code on their machines. So that's why cloud-based computing is the solution. Also, because Python dependencies are constantly changing, there's a high probability that your code just breaks. And to have it in the cloud, especially like Colab has Gemini attached to it, and you can get fixed, right? So there's something to be said about having Python not just as code that I have to cut and paste. But if we have that somewhere that we can run it in the cloud, since you already do that, that might be a deal.
Yeah, it is a cloud. We also run it in the cloud. So we have like a fixed environment that is always reproducible, so that it's not like we are installing like dependencies on the fly, which is useful. So we can expose all of that in a form of IPython notebook, because that's what it uses in the background. Um, and for the data sharing, yes, I think I saw a question like that Dandy is still private. Yeah, so if it is private, then we have to really think how we can pull the data in some of those like cloud notebooks. One way would be to do that if I'm pretty sure it exists for many cloud providers, but let's say S3. Let's pick S3 as an example. You can create a pre-signed URL of a private S3 bucket with a particular like a download access. So we can just take that pre-signed URL, literally download the data into the cloud notebook, and we are done. Or if you have like any data set already uploaded in a public S3 bucket, then we can just literally directly also download that. So I think these would be like the easiest and the cleanest way to integrate, and it might be also have more generalizability across like other projects. So
yeah, in fact, so there is public access on Dandy. And so in fact, why this is helpful is that because these data files can be more than your gigabyte limits, but you can actually open them and stream them. You do not necessarily have to download them, put them on your RAM.
Which is right. So I think our execution engine can store as much as you would like. So the upload limit to 100 gigabyte is to sort of prevent users to wait a long time, because they have to then upload, and depending on your internet, it can take a long time to upload the data set. It's not really like an execution limit. The execution is limitless because we're running it in cloud servers, and that's where exactly like downloading it from a pre-signed URL would be useful, because we can then tackle to any datasets. Yeah.
I think what we could do is work together to make the OpenScope predictive processing data sort of easily accessible to your system.
Right.
And then in the group, it would be great if there are a few folks interested to sort of play around with generating a large number of hypotheses and then maybe the output will put it back either in Google Colab or in a GitHub repo that everybody can see, and we sort of iterate on that. What do you think?
Sounds like a plan.
Because we have a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of analysis that are written, and it's so many directions that I think having this sort of wide exploration could be useful to everyone. And then we'd sort of close on one with like more human focus effort. I feel like that's how it could be useful if it comes out to find something.
Yeah,
we'll
should
know.
definitely try
We'll
that.
see.
Yeah, we should
Yeah.
definitely try that. Yeah.
Okay. It's 10:10. I want to make sure we don't want to take any questions on the audience that we should address, given that Bodhi and Pavi are present. And how do you recommend people reach out to you?
Just email us.
Okay.
I will send you the emails and we can follow up on email. Yeah, sorry, I blanked.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you so much. It was really interesting, and I'm sure we'll sort of explore more.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the interest. I'm so
Thank you, Jeremy.
excited.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy.